Hi, everybody. It's Jim Acosta, and I am live with Katie Phang and Brian Tyler Cohen, two independent media stars. Katie, brand new.
Brand new.
To this space, and we're live on the Contrarian Substack channel as well as the New Republic Substack channel. And you guys are both on Substack. Katie, you just arrived. Brian, you've been here for a while. Also on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. And I've been here for a few months now, and I have to say it is an amazing experience. You feel liberated, you feel free, you can say all sorts of things that you weren't able to say before. Katie knows what I'm talking about. Brian, you've been doing this for some time. But Katie, let me start with you. I mean, a lot of folks are probably wondering, how are you doing?
I'm great. Yeah. I'm still kind of getting my land legs underneath me. But to your point, the Substack community has been incredibly welcoming, and the Contrarian, the New Republic, has consistently been a partner in not only defending democracy, but also making it feel like it's a completely feasible thing for all of us to do. Everyday Americans can kind of, lift their voices and get things done. So the idea of being able to do it in an independent way, and to say what you want to say, the way you want to say it, and again, to meet the urgency where it needs to be met, is the most liberating feeling right now.
Yeah, and Brian, I mean, obviously the topic for the discussion for this panel and for what they're doing at the Contrarian and the New Republic today is how is democracy doing 100 days under Donald Trump? I mean, what are your thoughts on that subject? And how has independent media been affected and impacted all of this, do you think?
Well, it's interesting because on one hand, obviously the state of democracy is pretty grim these days. And as we get deeper and deeper into the Trump administration, things look pretty bad. I mean, they seem to be getting worse and worse as his authoritarian impulses continue to let themselves show. But something that does give me hope is that, especially, look, I've been doing independent media for years and years and years now, and there does seem to be finally this embrace of independent media, of this space, and of people who are willing to your exact point, meet the moment with the urgency that it deserves, be able to say what they want to say without feeling like they're held back by some feeling of responsibility that they have to both sides everything that they say, that they have to equivocate, that if you say something negative about Donald Trump, you have to also say something negative about Democrats. And that, I think, we're finally losing that, and that has been a long time coming. And so that is something that gives me hope, that there is a sense of straight talk, at least among pro-democracy media, that we haven't seen before.
Yeah, I mean, and some of this comes back to, Katie, how the media are handling themselves in this moment. And you and I both have experienced this on the other side of the coin. I mean, there are plenty of headlines to delve into. I mean, just this past week, just on Sunday night, Scott Pelley is on 60 Minutes.
That was incredibly powerful.
Having to explain how, there are corporate pressures over at CBS, that Paramount is essentially looking over their shoulder, wanting to have approval over stories that they do. And as I've been saying on my podcast, when 60 Minutes is in trouble, we're all in trouble.
Yeah, and the reason why I want to underscore what you're talking about is we were all stunned when we heard Scott say that. We shouldn't be stunned. We should actually think that should be the norm. That level of transparency and honesty about people's motivations and intentions should always be the norm. And so the fact that we were like, go Scott, we should actually be more like, no, actually, this should be the standard by which we all apply ourselves. Because when people try to obfuscate why they're saying what they're saying, when they try to hide the reasoning behind why they're reporting a certain way or coming to the stories with a certain lens, that's when they're completely betraying Americans. That's when democracy really is dying in darkness, because we're not having the light shone upon the issues the way that it should be. And just from a legal perspective, because that's my jam, right? That's my lane. There is no both sidesism when it comes to the law. You may advocate a position, but the law is supposed to be black and white. And when we get this opportunity to reach more people in independent media, and we give people the ability to have the knowledge to understand what's really at stake, that's when they feel empowered to be able to affect a change. It's not getting thousands of people to converge in one place, even though we're seeing that happening right now. It's how are we covering those thousands of people in that one place? And then how are we talking about how these issues impact them? Even just sitting down and having a cup of coffee with somebody, but knowing what the facts are is what's going to make a difference.
What do you think, Brian?
Well, I come at it from a little different perspective because I come at it from persuasion. I'm an activist. I obviously all of my brand relies on being able to be credible and honest and accurate. And look, I never had a network behind me so that I can fall back on if I screwed up. If I say something that's false, that hurts me. That's a direct hit to my reputation, to my name, and so I can't fall back and say this is MSNBC's fault. I would love to be able to say this is MSNBC's fault, but I can't. But I think from a political perspective, a persuasion perspective, the benefit of independent media at this moment is that, first of all, there are more people who are watching independent media, and there are more persuadable folks who are watching independent media. And something that was difficult for me to reconcile when I was on acting as a contributor on MSNBC was that I'm speaking to people who are largely already bought in. I'm bringing sand to the beach at this point, so to speak. And that was, look, everybody wants to get pet, right? Like, it's easy to want to go into an audience that you're comfortable with and get claps and pets from those people. But really, the work of politics is the work of persuasion. Yeah. That's a little bit more difficult, and you have to be willing to talk to people who are not already bought in. And the independent media space allows you to do that in a way that you can't do if you're on networks talking to people who are already bought in 100%.
Yeah. I mean, and the other thing that we have to talk about is the way Trump has attacked the press. I mean, he's not only done his, sort of stock and trade.
Do you know anything about that, Jim? I mean, I know
So
this is kind of new to you, right?
Well, no, I mean, I had the experience during the first Trump administration where they took my press pass and we had to go to court and get it back. A federal judge that was appointed by Donald Trump gave me my press pass back. But they've taken it to the next level in this new administration in Trump 2.0. They've gone after the Associated Press. They have said if you are the Associated Press and you don't adopt the Gulf of America as the name for the Gulf of Mexico, which is absolutely ridiculous and silly, then you're not going to be welcome in the Oval Office in Air Force One and so on. AP had to take the Trump administration to court. They actually cited my case in all of that. But Katie, what are your thoughts on all of this? I mean, how is it that Trump can push these boundaries? Because I was saying this the other day. I sort of feel like he's cracked the code in how to hurt the press. If you look at the ABC settlement, if you look at what's taken place at 60 Minutes, and with the AP, it has cowed the press into some form of submission that we're seeing right now, and it's hard to watch.
I think it's now reached a level of uber manipulation of the fourth estate. It's this idea that the intimidation is going to drive the dialogue, and that's something that we have to protect, especially when it comes to independent media. It's not just the freedom to be able to report on the issues the way that we think is appropriate, but it's also to make sure that, again, there's access to the information. And that's the most troubling thing, right? It's you don't do the Gulf of America, you can't come in. We're going to put in disreputable outlets at the Pentagon now. And we're going to pull ones that traditionally are just the media sources that are going to be able to provide the facts, the truth, the evidence. I've said this time and time again. What's really at stake is the absence of critical thinking. So what we're trying to do is create a space within which we provide, in a persuadable fashion, the facts, the truth, and the evidence. It does rely on people to be able to exercise their critical thinking skills, but in this instance, you still see, though, judges that are doing the right thing. You still see rulings that are saying that you cannot restrict this access or you cannot do this. I agree, though, that there is an undeniable negative impact that we're seeing from Trump 2.0 that is making other people scared. But to Brian's point, Brian has the ability to influence how people are thinking. Yeah. You have that ability as well. And now I have an even greater ability to be able to influence how people are thinking.
Yeah, I mean, kudos to the AP for standing up for themselves. I mean, they weren't cowed in submission, but a lot of these other corporations have. And I mean, Brian, what are your thoughts when you see the way that, I mean, has Trump kind of succeeded in a way in intimidating the press?
He has, and it's not just the press. I mean, we saw what he did with the law firms. When we saw Paul Weiss, for example, capitulate because they thought that it might help them in the short term, might help them, alleviate some pain momentarily. What that did is basically embolden Trump. It showed him that, okay, he can smell blood in the water, and now he can go after a few more law firms, and then 5, and then 10, and then 15, and now he's got
$1 billion later
in pro bono legal services in a sector where he was especially weak. I mean, like, this guy is not known for succeeding in the courtroom, right?
Can he,
But now,
can he use any of this money for his legal defense after he leaves office? I mean, that's one of the questions that I have, ladies and gentlemen.
God knows he'll try.
Yeah.
And so then he saw, okay, I was able to do it with these law firms. What about these tech billionaires? And then, of course, we had Bezos and Zuckerberg and Xu all give him $1 million to his inaugural
The
fund.
original knee benders.
The original knee benders show up
Dubious honor.
on the dais behind him. Saw that he could do that with ABC News, which capitulated to the tune of $15 billion. So then he went after CBS, and of course we were just talking about what happened with their parent company, Paramount. And so in each sector, he's recognizing that all he has to do is prove that he can own one or two of them, and then the other ones fold. And that's the dangerous part of this, because where does it end? I mean, if he can exert enough pain on just a couple of the big players, then he can basically get the rest of them to fall like dominoes, and that's what he's doing, which is why it's so important. It's incumbent on folks in the independent media space who aren't over leveraged, because none of us have an e-commerce platform that we also have to think about. None of us have broader brands, parent companies that we have to worry about doing some merger or acquisition for. That's the
Maybe a little merch here and there. That might be it.
A little bit of merch, but
merch pitch.
Yeah.
But like the interesting part of this is that you look at these big media conglomerates and you think, okay, how could you bully the CBSs and Paramounts and Amazons and NBC Universals of the world? But the fact is that by virtue of the fact that they have so many other properties that the federal government has a hand in issuing licenses to or approving mergers for, they're so exposed in a way that independent media just isn't. And so that's the benefit of being at this particular moment, at this particular time, when you do have a federal government that's willing to use its leverage to tamp down on the media by going after other arms of these companies.
Yeah, and that's the issue with Paramount and CBS and the Skydance deal that they want to go through, and Sherry Redstone.
Well, that's why they have to cozy up to an administration and make sure that merger gets rubber stamped. But that also bleeds into the law firm thing, because
I was gonna ask you about
have
that.
mergers and acquisition partners that have portable books of business, and they are huge chunks of income to the tune of a lot of money for these big law firms. And that's the reason why there's a fear from the higher ups in terms of the managing partners, et cetera, that the people will walk with their books of businesses. And that's the reason why they are capitulating the way that they are. But you know what's amazing is people are forgetting at those upper echelons of power and money. These companies weren't built out of nothing. They were built from American support. They were built from Americans' money, right? It was our investments into them, whether it's e-commerce or otherwise. These are the things that people forget. Sometimes entire brands are built on what people gave in terms of their devotion and investment of their time in that brand, right? And these people we're all being forgotten along the way. And so if we're not beholden to big corporate overlords, if we're not owing something, then that's where the independent media gets its freedom to be able to say, you know what, we're going to call it the way it is. True calling of balls and strikes the way it was supposed to be.
And Brian, I got to ask you about this, because we've seen this in the briefing room in recent weeks, and this is really in your wheelhouse. You're seeing Caroline Leavitt bring in these new media stars on the far right. They're calling it the new media seat. Have you had a chance to sit in the new media seat, or is it only reserved for the likes of Tim Pool?
Well, I was going to say, we've got Tim Pool, we've got Sean Spicer. I mean,
Where's your beanie?
It is.
When it's 75 degrees in D.C., I'm not wearing a beanie. I'm sorry.
The interesting part of that is
not going to happen.
Where was Brian Glenn from? What is it? Real America's Voice.
Marjorie Taylor
is that
Greene's
MTG's
boyfriend.
boyfriend, right?
MTG's boyfriend, who was so critical of Vladimir Zelensky, whose country just so happens to be at war with the biggest country in Europe, and yet his attire wasn't appropriate. But crickets when it came to Tim Pool and his beanie sitting in the White House. Yeah.
How about that blue suit?
But to answer your question, no, I do not presume that I'll be in the White House answering questions for Caroline Leavitt anytime soon. But frankly, I mean, you look at this, and it really is, I mean, it is embarrassing. To the questions that they get are so, that does a disservice to independent media, because you have the opportunity to go in there and prove your bona fides, right? And instead, the questions that they get are just so groveling and sycophantic and obsequious.
Softballs.
That I mean, if this is what independent media is, it reflects pretty poorly. Granted, there's a clear delineation between what's happening on the left and right, but But
Yeah.
you know,
No, well, I think what we're seeing is sort of the onset of, and maybe not even the onset, but the solidification of sort of a Trump state media in this country. And you have this sort of right-wing media apparatus over there that's willing to just sort of be his mouthpiece. And it's sort of depressing because, I mean, one of the things that I've been asking the question of is Joe Rogan really going to spend the next 4 years just sort of saying, yes, sir, yes, you're absolutely right, Donald Trump. You know, the dear leader kind of, is that what Megyn Kelly is going to do the next 4 years? Are they all going to be like these sycophantic mouthpieces? I mean, that sounds kind of boring. Sounds like more fun for us.
I was going to say, bring it on.
it remains to be seen because we are seeing some fissures. I think as things get more and more difficult, then as the tariffs continue to bear down, as 401ks continue to get gutted, as these trade deals continue to go south, whatever it may be, I think it's going to be more and more difficult for them to really sustain these positions because, to your exact point, I mean, just nodding along like it's North Korea state TV is going to get pretty rough for these people to do, especially when there's really not a lot of success for them to report on. It would be one thing if he was, look, really what he should have done is just come into office and just gone golfing. And he would probably be at high 50s approval rating right now, continue to coast on a very strong economy that he inherited from Joe Biden. Instead, he decided to beat his chest and try to prove himself this tough guy around the world, and threaten to annex half of our allies, and then threaten trade wars against the rest of the world. And we're seeing in a globalized economy how we don't have the same strength that he thinks that we have.
Well, and there's a boomerang effect. I mean, he's essentially assured the victory of Mark Carney as the new Prime Minister of Canada. He's
Yeah.
going to remain Prime Minister
Not
of Canada.
only that,
Yeah.
Polyev lost his seat. Not
Lost
only
his
is he
seat.
not the Prime Minister, he's no longer in Parliament at all because of the impact that Trump had.
Maybe he'll get a Substack. I don't know. Or
That's right.
Maybe he'll get a show on YouTube.
Get a
There's
Temple
going to be a
beanie.
whole
A Temple beanie, yes, that
There's going to be a whole never Trump faction Canada style as the result of his impact on this election.
It's wild. And the Wall Street Journal had an editorial today, saying that Trump is on his way to having a failed second term. And when you've lost the Wall Street Journal,
Yeah, that's pretty
Katie,
brutal.
that's pretty brutal.
That's a little Mean Girls.
But we're running a little short on time. But I mean, your thoughts, just to kind of start wrapping things up, as to the power of independent media in this moment. I was talking with Hamish, the head of Substack, the other night, and I was saying, the next election could be a Substack election in this country, an independent media election in this country, where those voices, those platforms, are almost as important or more important than the networks and the major news outlets that we have all grown to love over the years, and maybe grown to hate a little bit over the years, but that we've become accustomed to as being part of the norm in American society. I really think we're on the verge of a new moment in media.
And I think the example of the White House press briefing room just goes to show, though, you don't need that access to be able to speak to Americans. You don't have to have a seat in front of Caroline Levitt every day to be able to speak to Americans and tell them what's really at issue. Because in independent media, we're not only going to take those issues, but we're going to present them in a way that is completely cloaked and protected by the truth. And that is what you're not going to get from an existing Trump White House. So why not lean in more into independent media, knowing that what you're getting is unadulterated and clean versus the propaganda that's coming from the state-run machine.
Yeah, and Brian, I mean, people are smart enough now, they're savvy enough now to sniff this stuff out. They, like you were saying at the beginning of this, they see the both sidesing. They're tired of it. They're tired of the triangulation. Let me have Steve Bannon on my podcast because it'll appeal to a certain demographic audience. They're just sort of tired of the phony baloney bullshit. And you
just said bullshit.
And you can say that now. But you can now just talk to people and be real with them. That's what I like about it.
And look, I think the beauty of these platforms is that not only are, again, more people on them, but a lot of the people who are leaving legacy media for that exact reason are finding something refreshing in what independent media folks are able to offer up. And so that really is the best part of all of this, is that this is filling a void, at least on the left, that has been absent for so long. The right has had and invested in right-wing media for the better part of a decade now, and that's been
They're
largely
ahead of the curve.
They're far ahead of the curve, and that's because the left, the Democratic Party, has viewed legacy media as their message distribution system, for better or for worse, for the better part of that decade. But I think now people are recognizing that asymmetry that's been at play, and look, they're hungry for voices that, to your exact point, are more authentic and are going to bring unadulterated truth that isn't colored by some other priorities or financial interests that are tied along.
Yeah, and I like to tell folks, because people bring this up all the time as a question, how is it you can be opinionated or offer your take on things? Has anybody seen Good Night and Good Luck? Has anybody seen what Edward R. Murrow did back in the day? And in the strong tradition of Walter Cronkite over at CBS, who during the Vietnam War went to Vietnam, came back and said the Vietnam War cannot be won. And Lyndon Johnson said, if I've lost Walter Cronkite, I've lost middle America. So there's a strong tradition in media. It's almost like we've been brainwashed into thinking by the likes of Fox News and so on that an anchorman can't tell you the goddamn truth. But they should be able to tell you the goddamn truth. And right now, the media is under attack in this country, and it takes strong independent voices like both of you to make sure that we remain the sort of defenders of the people. Katie, any final thoughts?
I just want to emphasize that something like this that we're sitting and being a part of right now, I just love the idea that not only are you recognizing the dangers, but we're also leaning into the optimism of knowing that there are people that are fighting. I'm thrilled to be able to go to court with Norm Eisen and State Democracy Defenders Fund and other amazing
Has
organizations.
Norm been in court? He's been in.
Norm, I don't know. Have you been in court anytime soon? But
Has Norm been out of court?
I don't know. That's a good point.
Fleetingly to be able to spend time with us. But, the idea to be able to go and fight the fights where they need to be fought, that's the thing. I want people to understand that are tuning in right now that these battles are being fought even when maybe you're not tuned in, and these conversations you're having as quickly and as efficiently as you are, Brian, and in your reach, and you, Jim. This is that luxury that we're getting right now from Substack and from other type of forums and platforms. And so I'm grateful to know that I'm not in this fight alone, that you're doing it, that everybody here at The Contrarian, The New Republic, you, Brian, that we're all together in this because we do have strength in numbers.
Yeah, and Brian, final thoughts. You have hope as we're
I
sitting
do.
here?
I do, because I think something that I've been waiting to see for a really long time is this idea, to Katie's exact point, of fight. And we have, look, coming from the perspective of somebody, I am an out and out Democrat, and so I have been looking at a Democratic Party that has largely been much more feckless and ineffective compared to the Republican Party for the better part of a decade now. And so to see that the litmus test for Democrats, has gone from, okay, is this person progressive? Is this person a moderate? I think right now what people are looking for, regardless of whether where you land on the ideological spectrum, is whether you're willing to fight. And that is such a welcome change for me, who's been really begging and pleading to see some of that same fight. I mean, look, we have seen the best encapsulation, distillation of the Democrats' fecklessness up to this point has been how, if the parliamentarian, for example, says that the Democrats can't do something, Democrats go, well, parliamentarian says no, and so that's it. What could we possibly do? And the Republicans get told no by the parliamentarian, and they say, well, we're going to go ahead and fire the parliamentarian and just get a new parliamentarian, or pretend that the parliamentarian doesn't exist. And it's really difficult from my perspective, from an outsider's perspective, to be able to see that and to see what Mitch McConnell does and to see how we fight back or don't fight back against that. But I think that we are finally entering an era where there is enough pressure on Democrats that, A, if you want to stay in office, then you're going to be able to bring the requisite tools to make sure that you can succeed there and fight back there. And B, if you don't, that's no problem, but you're going to get replaced by somebody who will. And we've already seen some of these older school Democrats start to drop out and announce their retirements and make way for real generational change. And that's something that does give me hope as we move forward.
Well, you bring up a couple of good points. One is, let's give a shout out to Dick Durbin, who is retiring, and he knows when it's time to retire, so there isn't some calamity as a result of him not retiring. I'll just put that out there, off topic. Just say that as we're speaking here. But Katie, Brian raises a really interesting thing that we should maybe close out the conversation with, and that is I sort of get the sense that progressives in this space now kind of feel like it's okay and maybe a healthy and good thing to be a little critical of the Democrats and say, you know what, guys, you kind of screwed some things up here and there, and you haven't been tough enough. And as Brian was saying, people want to see a little fight out of you, and they're not seeing it right now.
I balk a little bit at the labels because the labels, I think, kind of
that's a good point.
pigeonhole
Yeah.
people into a pre-existing space. I think it's time for the new world order. And what that is do you give a shit? Do you care enough about me and my family to want to fight for me? Because I care enough about you and your family to want to fight for you.
Yeah.
That's what we need to be focusing on. It's not so much, did I have it right? Was I carrying the right banner? Was the clarion call loud enough? And that's why people are finally seeing the light. People's, come to Jesus moments happen at different times and for different reasons. I just want to make sure that you're just as invested in what my future is going to be for my family and my loved ones as I am for you. Because if I'm putting it all on the line, you better be ready to do it for me. That is my standard. It's not finally people have this huge, like epiphany that it's time to do these things. And so for me, that is what I think is the gauge of whether or not we're ready to meet the moment where it needs to be met.
I mean, that's a wonderful thought. I mean, one of the things that I tell folks all the time is that I'm less concerned about what's called Trump derangement syndrome as I am Trump depression syndrome, which is what we saw a lot of during the interregnum period between the election and the inauguration of Donald Trump. And you do get the sense now, to Brian's point and to your point that was so eloquently put a few moments ago, Katie, people are kind of picking themselves up and dusting themselves off and getting engaged. And one of the things that you see in independent media and places like Substack is that engagement. And, I tell people all the time, the people who watch my show, people watch Brian's show and your show, these folks are engaged. Yeah. They know what the hell they're talking about, and they are passionate. And you better not bullshit around with them in this very important moment. And I think, Katie, and just to close with some final thoughts here, you're absolutely right. In the final analysis, where we are right now as a country is not a left-right country. I mean, people might still view it through that prism, and maybe the 10 o'clock cable newscast or whatever channel still frames things in those fashions. But in my view, and perhaps you'll agree with me, we're in a moment where it's pro-democracy versus anti-democracy. And you can be from any political stripe at this moment, but we need to know where you stand on that particular issue.
100%. I think it's become a completely binary issue now, and that is actually a luxury we usually don't have, but it is now crystal clear.
Yeah.
If you can come down on the right side of history, I'm willing to die on that hill.
Yeah.
Why not?
Yeah, when they're taking four-year-old little kids with cancer who are U.S. citizens and sending them off to Honduras, I think that's a pretty clarifying moment.
Yeah, I mean, God willing, we get to look back at this moment in 2025 and recognize that when we were on the precipice, did you stay silent? Which side were you on? And we'll be able to look back and say that the people who stood up and fought were fighting for something that we were able to preserve.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you, Katie, and thank you, Brian. Great discussion. Thanks to Norm and the great folks at The Contrarian. Thanks to the great folks at The New Republic. This has been an excellent discussion. I've enjoyed it very much and want to thank all of you for tuning in, and continue to tune in to Brian's show and Katie's show and my show if you have a little extra time. But for now, thanks for watching.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, everybody.